I started thinking about my disability because, to your point, and we'll dig into this more, I'm sure, but traveling with a wheelchair as a wheelchair user comes with a lot of challenges, and it makes you really start to value certain things in your life, and also start thinking, why did this happen to me? Why is this here? What about all these other people in parts of the world that don't have access to medical care? And my whole life, there has really been no genetic answer to my diagnosis. And so I just started to live with that. But through the traveling and the self-discovery, I started thinking it towards the end of my sabbatical year, I wonder if there's new technology out there. So I reached out to a couple of doctors, and I found a geneticist who was willing to work with me at Johns Hopkins, actually. And they are currently doing some genetic testing for me, and they think that I went home and I told my mom, I'm probably 7 or 8 at this point. Mom, I have a life goal. I want to go see all 50 states. And she kind of chuckles a little, and she's like, you know what, you should do that. She's supporting my life goal. It is a great goal. Before you know it, you start getting to places in the world that you never thought you would get to. I would say around 30 when I said, kind of made up this decision that I wanted to see all countries in the world before I die.
Welcome to the Winging It Travel podcast with me, James Hammond. Every Monday, I'll be joined by guests to talk about their travel stories, travel tips, backpacking advice, and so much more. Right now, I'm taking the podcast on the road travelling with me. So tune in every week for short-form episodes detailing all my travels alongside my Monday guest episode. Are you a backpacker, gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you, designed to inspire you to travel. There'll be stories to tell, tips to share, and experiences to inspire. Welcome to the show. Let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode, where I'm joined by Renee Bruns. Renee is a wheelchair super traveller, having travelled to 118 countries to date, all 50 states, been to every continent, and holds a Guinness World Record. I'm keen to learn about all of that, and also what it's really like to travel as a wheelchair user, and how difficult it is or not for Renee travelling the world. Got a lot of questions, excited to talk about this today. Renee, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this conversation today.
Yeah, I've seen you about on social media quite a bit, so I thought, okay, I need to get you on the podcast. I spoke to Rick Gazarian. He's like, yeah, be a great speaker. Is that cool? So yes. I thought I'd reach out. So I've not done many interviews for 3 or 4 months because of the road trip. So I'm really keen to get back into this one. I'm really excited. So yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Where in the world are you right now?
So I am currently in the United States. I'm in Ohio. I am spending a year in Argentina. I'm in Ohio for just a short period of time, about a week and a half. I'm actually heading back to South America tomorrow. Argentina is my home base for the year. I'm about halfway through that year cycle, but really wanted to spend some time in South America, perfecting my Spanish, which is admittedly a challenging feat. And I'm almost 40, so I attribute it to my age. I don't know if that's just like some sort of cop-out excuse, but I'm slowly learning and, just challenging my brain and immersing myself in the language and the culture. It's been a fantastic experience.
Interesting. I've got a few things there, actually. I read or listened to the other day on a podcast that 34 is the age that you start to find things difficult afterwards, learning new things. So I don't think it's an excuse. You're fine there. But also, why Argentina? What was the thinking there?
So it's really a funny story. My life partner, Tony, is from Costa Rica. We've been dating for 10 years. And when I had just gotten done from a year of traveling and said, hey, I think I want to go spend some time in South America, kind of as a soft landing, coming back from my traveling, and really wanted to immerse myself it wasn't even Argentina, but really wanted to immerse myself in a Spanish speaking culture. And I naturally thought, let's go to Costa Rica. And he said, look, I grew up in Costa Rica. I don't want to go there. I want to go check out somewhere else. And from my standpoint, I was like, you choose. I don't really care where we go. I just want to go and immerse myself and have some fun exploring South America. So he said, let's go to Buenos Aires. I love Argentina. It's fairly inexpensive right now. Unfortunately, they have some political things going on that are driving that. But from our standpoint, it's easy to get to, and it's a beautiful, beautiful city. So we chose Buenos Aires, Argentina. We've bounced around, kind of checking out some other places nearby. But I totally left it up to him, and he chose Argentina. So that's where we ended up.
I tell you what, I agree with that. if you want to learn Spanish,
Uh-huh.
I thought this when I was traveling South America, that if I really want to learn this language, I can get by basics, but
Uh-huh.
get deep dived into it. I need to go and probably stay somewhere for a bit, like 6 months to a year, to really
Uh-huh.
immerse yourself and go straight in. The only thing with Argentina is I found those guys speak real quick.
They do. They speak very quick, and they have, I think it's one of the most beautiful Spanish accents I've ever heard, but it's very different than what I'm used to being so close to Mexico and Central
Mm.
America. It's very different. It has a lot of Italian influence. So it's beautiful, but it's fast and it's different. And my ear, I keep thinking, and I tell my boyfriend all the time, I'm like, I think the muscles in my ear are just changing because they have to pick up on these new sounds, and they're not used to it. So it's been a learning experience. There have been a few tears at times when I've thought I've understood something and didn't, and
Oh,
used the wrong choice of words and got myself into some, not, I wouldn't say sticky situations, funny situations,
yeah.
but it's been fun. And to anybody out there that wants to learn a new language and is learning a new language, kudos to you, because it's hard work.
Yeah, it's hard work. And I asked a local guide in Bolivia, said, okay, tell me where to go in your
Uh-huh.
eyes to learn Spanish. And he sort of gave a lowdown on a lot of countries. He said, don't go
Mhm.
Chile. He said they
Right.
use too much slang. Is that
Uh-huh.
okay? He said Argentines speak quick. Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. He said Mexico is okay, but if you want a top-notch experience, as in like you're gonna hear the words correctly, go Colombia. I
Yes.
was like, okay. But they do use Colombian Spanish for films, so there must be a reason for that.
Of course. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I have heard the same thing about Colombia. So I'm with you. Go to Colombia. I think you have a much easier time than what I'm going through right now. But hey, I threw myself in. I'm giving
Yeah,
myself some credit for doing it.
it gets easier from now on. So
Yeah,
you're onto a winner.
exactly. Yes, exactly.
Okay, we're going to delve into some subjects here because I think a lot of listeners will be keen to understand from your perspective what it's like to travel. So I want to kick off first your physical disability. Do you
Mhm.
know, I read on your website that it was undiagnosed.
It is undiagnosed. It's an interesting story. So a year and a half ago, I'm gonna kind of go way back a little bit so you can
Sure.
understand how I got to this point. But a year and a half ago, I left I was an executive at a Fortune 500 company, leading a national team of service people with an insurance company. And this was post pandemic, or kind of towards the end of the pandemic, and like so many people, just totally burnt out and saying, what am I doing with my life? So I it was that whole, like, we all get that. I think that everyone has had that kind of reflection. And I've always had this dream of taking a year off of work and just traveling, going out and seeing the world and experiencing the people. And I really needed that. I needed this refresh on humanity. There was so much hate from the pandemic and the political environment, especially in the US, but really around the world. And there's just all of this stuff going on. And I needed this reset. So I left on a year-long sabbatical, and I got everything I needed out of that. And ironically, towards the end of that trip, I I started thinking about my disability, because, to your point, and we'll dig into this more, I'm sure, but traveling with a wheelchair as a wheelchair user comes with a lot of challenges, and it
Mm,
makes you really start to value certain things in your life, and also start thinking, why did this happen to me? Why is this here? What about all these other people in parts of the world that don't have access to medical care? And my whole life, there has really been no genetic answer to my diagnosis. And so I just started to live with that. But through the traveling and the self-discovery, I started thinking it towards the end of my sabbatical year. I wonder if there's new technology out there. We all get it. The technology is
mm,
flying faster than any of us can really keep up with. And so I reached out to a couple of doctors, and I found a geneticist who was willing to work with me at Johns Hopkins, actually. And they are currently doing some genetic testing for me. And they think that with the continued research into the human genome, that they'll be able to get me an official diagnosis. So I
wow.
am, very excited about that. And it's one of those things that traveling has really made me appreciate my access to medical care, my access to, something so simple as a wheelchair that
Mm,
my whole life I just assume, everyone has these types of things, and I do have it, but the also the opportunity to be able to go out and say, who am I? What is this? What has caused me to have this disability? So I don't have an official name for you, and that's kind of a long-winded
nah, that's good.
answer to your question. Hopefully here in the next 2 months, I will have an official diagnosis.
So just to get this clear for the listeners, this has been from since you're a child, since birth.
Yes. So when I was born in 1984, so 39, almost 40 years ago. And at the time, ultrasounds for pregnant women they weren't a common thing unless there was suspicion that something could be wrong, or maybe there was a previous genetic issue in the family. So my mom did not have an ultrasound. So I come out of the womb and she thinks I am the perfect baby, and still does to this day. But there's some clear deformities with my skeletal structure, and mostly in my feet. I had what is called club feet. So the doctors obviously knew this right away, and they say you need to start seeing some specialists. And the town I grew up in, just to kind of put some frame of reference here, it had a population of 3,000 people.
Wow.
So it's this very small town. There's no internet. There's local doctors and family doctors, that type of thing, but there's not a lot of specialists. There's certainly no geneticists. And so, they refer her to a geneticist, and she and my dad too, they both start to drive kind of from Ohio to Indiana, and then eventually to Pennsylvania. And, we start going further and further. And through all of that, they still don't have answers, but there's lots of surgeries and operations, but there's no official name. They know that there's a skeletal disorder. But what really, the irony of this, and I call it the silver lining, because, I always try to see the positive in it. Because of that, because of my disability, we started traveling before I can even remember. And I was, 4 or 5 years old when I got on an airplane to go to New York City, which to a lot of people is not a huge deal, but to somebody who was born in a town with 3,000 people, New York City was a whole new world. And when I got there as a 5-year-old, it was like, Mom, I have to see more of this. I didn't even know that these things existed. And so it really launched me into this whole exploration of the world and of myself, and everything that comes with traveling. So I always say my disability is the silver lining that launched me into really putting myself out there and stretching myself to see the world.
Yeah, that's so inspirational. It's really hard, isn't it, for me to even relate, because obviously I walk. So
Sure.
The only thing I can relate to, I had a stint in hospital because I had an infection in my hip. I had 2 surgeries, and there was just a few days like, oh, am I gonna walk again? Because I couldn't walk.
Sure.
So I had to sort of relearn it after a week. They kind of said, "Oh, you're in your 20s, you're fine." So okay.
But that fear, and I think for so many of the listeners, I'm sure many of the listeners have had those moments where it's, oh my gosh, if this physical attribute or this physical ability is taken away, what does my life look like? And it's very scary to think of that possibility happening. And I'm very grateful that everything turned out for you and you're back on your feet, because it's scary to have to go through that.
It is. And a weird quirk here, sort of in relation to your story, is they don't know how the infection got there. And I think the consultant said to me, he's only seen it in 2 patients before, and they were old. I was like, okay. So he's never sent in someone young, and they didn't know how it got there, but they could treat it by testing it. But it's a really aggressive infection in my hip. But I had to get to the A&E department in a wheelchair, and I was part of excruciating pain. You do think, I can't even walk. It was just a really weird month, 6 weeks, to change your immediate life for 6 weeks. That was tough.
For sure. Well, and to have no answers. So
no answers.
It's not like, well, this has happened to 100 people before you. This is the process. In 3 weeks, you'll be fine. You're just kind of in that state of limbo. And those unanswered questions, that uncertainty is such a difficult place to sit in.
Yeah, real difficult. And it didn't help because I didn't know there's some complications, and I got septicemia and all this sort of stuff. So it really was a chaos thing.
Yeah,
but
very scary. I'm very grateful that you're fine.
But to finish on my point, obviously, just the bit that scared me was when I had to sign a form to say that in case of the worst case scenario, we might have to have a hip replacement or something that effect. Like, okay, I've got to sign it.
What can you do?
Yeah, what can you do? Yeah, mental.
Right. Yeah, it makes it very real though when you put your signature on that page.
Yeah, when you're sort of half out of it from the morphine, right?
Right.
Oh God, yeah. I also want to touch very quickly on the correct terms, because I think a lot of people, we're born in the 80s, right? Going to 90s. I think maybe some of the terms back then are not used now. So what
Right.
terms would you say are acceptable for people to use right now?
So this is a difficult question for me to answer, because I recognize and I appreciate this conversation. I try very hard with people that maybe aren't using the correct term to gently educate them, but also for me, it's really important to see how people treat somebody that has a disability versus the words they use, because I think the treatment, and this is again a personal opinion, but I think the treatment is so much more important than the choice of words.
Yes.
We're in a world right now where there is so much diversity, so many terms and so much terminology that can be used correctly or incorrectly. And more than anything, all I would say is to treat the people with kindness and respect being the number one thing. So terms, disabled, disability, I think are totally fine.
Okay.
It's easier for me to come up with words that you shouldn't use, and I don't know that they're even appropriate to say out loud, so I'm not even going to put them up here.
Okay.
You know what I would say, that and here's the other thing: when you think of disabilities, there is such a large spectrum of disabilities.
Yeah.
There's wheelchair users, there's vision impaired, there's hearing impaired, there's neurodiversity. So it is a difficult thing for me to say what other people would choose. I would say treat people with respect, and when in doubt, ask curiously and ask someone how they would prefer to be addressed, and respect that and use that.
Great, that's cool. I called you a wheelchair super traveler. I don't think we called one of those before.
And to me, that's not offensive at all, because I mean that's a compliment to me.
Okay. So. But like a wheelchair user is fine.
Absolutely,
cool.
absolutely.
Okay, so let's delve into, so you're going up with this disability and you're going off to New York City. It's a bit of an exciting trip. So I was going to ask, actually, was there a trip when you were younger that maybe sparked a bit of travel? I mean, you mentioned that one before, but maybe when you're a bit more older and you can understand, was there like a trip that you went on, or did your parents take you away on road trips that you think, I just want to do more?
So New York, I was 5, right before kindergarten.
Yeah.
So that was certainly, it was pretty young. But it was certainly an eye-opener of, oh my gosh, there's diversity in this world. There's big cities. I had never seen a building more than probably 3 or 4 stories high. So, that was cool. Subways and taxis, all those things that you don't have in little small towns. But what really, really got me going is when I was studying geography. I was in 3rd grade, and we were studying the United States geography, and there was this beautiful colored map hanging on the wall, and my teacher saying, there's 50 states, here they are, and talking about, just the different geographic components of all of the states. And I remember thinking, well, I want to go to all of them. I know I've been to Ohio. I know I've been to New York. I know I've been to, the surrounding states around Ohio. So I went home and I told my mom, I'm probably 7 or 8 at this point. Mom, I have a life goal. I want to go see all 50 states. And she kind of chuckles a little, and she's like, you know what, you should do that. Of course, she's supporting my life goal. It was a great goal. And every summer, my family and I would take a vacation, and without me really even knowing it was happening, we would start going to different states. So one year we went together as a family to Florida. One year we drove from Ohio all the way to Louisiana. So we went through a couple of states on the way, Kentucky, and I don't know what's on that path. But before I even knew it, I started realizing that she was, I don't even know if it was conscious on her part. It had to have been.
Yeah.
But saying like, we're going to go start seeing these new places. And it was a few years later. I was probably in 6th grade, 12 or 13 years old. And I went through and I started counting, and we were, in the 30s, and it was like, this is an achievable goal. I might actually be able to do this. It was fantastic. So by the time I got to college, I had been to all 50 states. Wow. And that was wonderful. But it really sparked me into this whole, like, wow, you can go see the world. It's doable. It's not totally unachievable. And I went through college, started building my career. And then a few years after I graduated college, I took a trip with my family again. We went to Italy, and that was doable. So then then it's all right. Now I'm in my mid-20s. I'm starting to travel with friends in the US, but then it's okay, well, let's go to France. Let's go to Spain. Let's go to Tunisia or Morocco, and you start just making these little small ventures. And before you know it, you start getting to places in the world that you never thought you would get to. And so I would say around 30 when I said, kind of made up this decision that I wanted to see all countries in the world before I die.
That's quite late, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree.
Mm.
I don't think I had the exposure to it. I was, before I went to Europe, I was in my mid-20s. And that's,
wow.
I think, is pretty rare for someone who's on this quest to get out and see the world. So you're right. I think it was pretty late. But it's a fantastic goal, and it's happening. I don't know when it will be complete. A lot of people ask me, what's your goal? And the world is a unique place, and there's always difficult places to get to, but I want to enjoy my time too. I don't just want to rush through it and check countries off for the sake of checking them off.
I think that's the key, isn't it? I think it's a great goal to have.
Absolutely.
I think there's only a few things for me for mine, like, well, how can I do it, like financially?
Sure.
Also, yeah, like you say, it's difficult. There's like, I don't know how many you agree with. Maybe it's like 140 to 50 that are easy for our passports, if you like.
Yep.
Then it's going to start getting more difficult just because of the visa situations and wars and stuff like that. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it's all those questions to answer in your mind, isn't there?
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm at 118 countries now. I always think I have about 20, 25 and then left, and then it's gonna get hard.
There's admin.
Yeah, exactly.
And in this time, the early trips to Europe, how was it traveling on airplanes? Was it difficult? Was it like extra admin involved? Maybe saying, "Hey, look, I'm going to need assistance," or was the industry just not set up for it?
In the beginning, it's a great question. Going to Europe, going back to my 20s, it was difficult, and it still is. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours on all of the airline stories I have. And I try to keep things positive, so I don't often talk about them, but I'm happy to dig into them. It's the airline industry, and it has changed a little bit, but in my opinion, it really hasn't changed much. There's and I don't think this is necessarily true just for the disabled population, but airlines are very much trying to push people through. Get on, get off, get on, get off, get on.
Yeah.
They're trying to make money. And I get that. But with that, especially for those populations that need special treatment or unique treatment, it's they can be a bit inhumane, and that's probably a very harsh word.
Wow, strong word. Yeah,
it is a very strong word, but there are degrading things that happen, and also a very strong word. But I have a lot of strong feelings for it, for how they treat disabled passengers. And what's really interesting about it is there tends to be a general, I will call it mistreatment, because I think that they do mistreat their passengers, but it varies person to person. And so I always wonder, what is the training like that these airlines are giving their employees? Because some employees are just better at being kind and respecting and treating people with that dignity that they deserve, and other employees are just pushing them through, and there's just not the respect. So maybe they're having a bad day, I don't know, but we all have bad days, and I don't know that we all need to be so nasty towards people.
I wonder, there's so many things to question here, isn't there? Like, for example, this might be a wrong assumption. Would low-cost airlines be worse than like a national carrier, for example?
Surprisingly, no. You would think that. You would think that, right? You would think that those, and in some ways, I think they might be better. It's really interesting. And here's the thing, though. I fly Delta a lot. So I'm in Atlanta. That's my hub. So I'm not flying in the US. I'm not flying Spirit or Southwest too often. Just Delta's a hub. So it tends to be the cheapest, and they're my airline of choice. But it's sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not, and it's a gamble. And I think that's the most frustrating part, is there's no consistency. You just don't know when you go in what that crew member or that staff member, what their mindset is going to be. So there's this constant wall of defensiveness and anxiety that comes in, saying, I don't know how they're going to treat me, so I'm putting up my barrier without even knowing it, because I want to protect myself. And I'm very aware of it. I hate it. I don't like it. And I try, I've tried all the tactics, be nice, kill them with kindness, all of that. But you get to a point where it's frustrating. And I think we all have those components in our life, but it is frustrating. And it's, I've, gosh, the airline stories, you've got me on a tangent now. The
Carry
airlines,
on.
yeah. I mean, if you want some stories, one that comes to mind is when I was flying to Micronesia, and
Okay.
my wheelchair, I boarded a flight in Hawaii. So we flew from California, I think San Francisco, to Hawaii to Micronesia. In Hawaii, they put a wheelchair on the a tag on the wheelchair, kind of like a baggage claim tag, but it's delivered to the gate. The individual put the wrong destination on it, so I get to Micronesia and it's not there. And so it's this whole, I'm emotional, like all get out emotional. I'm crying, I'm angry, I'm trying to keep it under control because there's no point in screaming at the person in Micronesia, they didn't do it, but there's a level of frustration that I can't see the island I came to see. So I think from my standpoint, that is certainly the most frustrating part of traveling is the airlines. I try very hard to have empathy to the employees there. I know they've got a lot going on. And I try to educate them, but it's a big feat. They're a necessary evil from my standpoint.
Yeah, because it must be such a unique industry in the fact that there's so many factors just for the employees.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I'm talking about is they might have great training, but literally before you got on, someone pissed them off and were like,
100%.
And they're just changed because they're just fed up already.
Yep.
Like if you were just before that person, that could have been totally fine. Like there's all these little factors. They might have worked 3 shifts in a row. There might be time zone difference. There's so many factors. I'm not saying it's an excuse for them.
No,
they should be trained and they should be courteous and do the right thing.
For sure. And I hear you. And so that's why I think I try to have empathy. And to your point, I don't know who was on that previous flight, and maybe they had another disabled passenger that had very different needs than mine. And so, their natural human response would be to say, right, well, the passenger 3 hours ago needed this. You're probably going to need that too, because that spectrum of disabilities is so broad. It's a hard thing for any human being to understand, all the spectrums of disability. So I do empathize with that completely. And I guess my advice for any of the airline crew listening is ask the person, treat them like a human being. Whatever they tell you is what they mean. I'm not going to tell you something that I don't want or that I don't mean. So ask and respect the answer. And I think that just goes a long way.
Okay. Another quick fire question here. When you pick your airline and your flight, do you pick your seat?
I do. I try to, assuming that I can, it's.
So what's best for you on an airplane?
So that's a great question. So the airlines like to put wheelchair users into an aisle seat. It's typically easier with an aisle chair. The aisle chair is right there next to the aisle. So priority is an aisle seat. I personally, it's not super difficult for me to crawl over to the window. I prefer the window.
Okay.
For a couple reasons. I usually get on first. So if I'm sitting in the aisle, people have to crawl over me.
Yeah.
And I also, once I'm on the flight, unless it's super, super, super long, I'm rarely getting up to go to the bathroom. So again, if I'm on the aisle, people are crawling back over me, and it's just it's an awkward, uncomfortable situation. So I prefer the window.
Okay. And linked to your wheelchair story with the one go missing. What gives me anxiety on all the process is just the casualness sometimes of how they do things, like just chucking your bag on there and they're chucking it over there, and it's just the tags don't. I'm like, oh, is the tag right? I just get a bit anxious about how they do things sometimes. I get it, they need to get through quickly, and 100%. I appreciate it, but sometimes it can give you a bit of anxiety.
I very rarely will check a bag for that reason, because I don't want it to get lost. I try to pack a small bag and put it in the cabin with me. But I don't always have that option with the wheelchair. Occasionally there will be a closet I can put it in, depending on the country and the size of the plane. But yes, exactly. It's like once I get out of that chair, it's like, oh, please get to where I need to go. Please be in one. Please work. All of those things. So it's to your point, the casualness of how people's belongings are treated.
Okay, and to keep this like on a positive note, what are some of the
Yes.
best what are some of the best airlines that you've experienced that are good for this?
Delta has been really good. And again, that's hit or miss, but Delta has been good. Fiji Airways was really good
Oh,
when I was doing some of the South Pacific islands. That they were fantastic. Gosh, those are probably the two that come to mind. Solomon Airlines, Solomon Airlines.
okay.
I flew those in the South Pacific too. They were really great.
Oh yeah, I've flown them before. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
interesting though. I'm thinking this through, and I'm thinking I said Solomon Airlines, I said Fiji Airlines. You're in the Pacific Islands. It's like this beautiful place.
Yeah.
The people are always happy.
Yeah.
So, there's not a ton of regulation in those little small islands. So maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, I was gonna say like Fiji Airways, just super fun. Like they
Yeah,
play a little song
exactly.
as you get off, and yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine it.
exactly. Everybody's
Yeah,
there
okay.
for a good time, or the majority of people are. So it's, nobody's in a bad mood.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, I was going to ask more questions later, but as we're here, I've got some more questions about it before we get to
Yeah.
the countries that you travel to. The first one is, in your experience, I know you travel to a lot of countries. Is there an area of the world or area of countries that are just better set up for it, or is it pretty much the same across the board?
Mm-hmm. So absolutely the Nordic countries, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, all of those are fantastic when it comes to accessibility and just the treatment of the disabled population. Beautiful countries too. A little more expensive in some parts of the world, but beautiful. Canada, the United States are great too. Australia, New Zealand have great infrastructure also.
Yeah.
I have not been to Japan yet. I'm hoping to get there next year. So I think Japan and Korea will be fantastic too.
Oh, they must be. They're just so nice.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
would accommodate anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just the infrastructure it appears to be, from what I've seen, relatively modern, and they have, all of those ramps and elevators and things like that.
Hey, yeah, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5, or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for traveling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you. Yeah, from my experience in Japan, they have a lot of accessibility.
Yeah.
They just think about stuff like that. They're just on it.
Exactly. It's a cultural thing,
Yeah. Can we touch on maybe some of the worst parts or worst areas?
Yeah. In full transparency, I have not done a huge amount of Africa. I've done South Africa, which was not too bad actually, Kenya, Morocco. So I can't speak to too much of Africa, but my gut tells me, for probably good reason, that it will be a difficult part of the world. For a lot of reasons, but accessibility specifically. Southeast Asia does not have the infrastructure. What I would say about Southeast Asia, I'm talking Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, that part of the world, they don't have the infrastructure, but the people there are incredibly helpful. And the treatment that I get is, it's top notch. So while they might not have ramps to cross the street, if I get to a curb and I can't get down or I can't get up, inevitably several people will come over to help me, and that might mean lifting up the entire chair to bring it down, cross the street, and lift it back up with me in it. So I think that's kind of it's a frustrating place because it's not accessible, but it's a very refreshing place because you see this side of humans that is just so heartwarming and a reminder that there is so much good in this world. And these people certainly don't have the economies of other countries, but they're evolving in a different way without that infrastructure, if you will.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I just think back to like a country like Laos, for example. I don't know if you've been to Laos.
Yes, love it.
So much of their population are disabled because of the war. been on war,
Absolutely.
and there's
Hmm.
still mines there and stuff like that. So I kind of got the feeling they're kind of on top of it in terms of helping people. Maybe not infrastructure because they're
Hmm.
quite a poor country, but yeah, I got the feeling that they're trying to bring awareness to disabilities.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you make such a good point. Because of the war, there are so many disabled people in that part of the world. And kind of a story that sticks out to me. I was in Vietnam. This was pre-pandemic. And we were driving down a road, and there was a roadside stand. It was kind of a touristy place, but there was it was a the entire, I guess it was a shop. I guess you can buy different things. It was little stands, kind of like a flea market,
Hmm.
and it was run entirely by disabled individuals. And many had lost limbs or had physical deformities, but they created these beautiful pieces of artwork or ceramic. And there was this sense of, we have this population of people that we really want to integrate into society, and they're limited with what they can do, but they can do this, and we're going to give them some opportunity to use the skills that they do have, and be part of the society.
Yeah, that's great. I do love
Yeah.
Vietnam. I think they've got some good things
Yeah,
going. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. We've gone through airlines, biggest challenges. Oh, yeah, we mentioned biggest sort of challenges as well, the infrastructure and stuff like that. Do you always travel solo or with a group or with your partner?
Some of both. Some of both.
Okay.
So before I left my job, I had always traveled with family or friends. So when I left, I wanted my partner to go with me very, very much, but he was loving his career. He said, go, like, you need to do this. This is a self-discovery trip for you. I will meet you along the way, every couple months or weeks, and just go and have fun. So I left. I was by myself for about, I think, 6 weeks. We met for a week. Then he went back to the US. I continued traveling around. So for that whole year, it was, the majority of it was by myself, but he met me a few times, and some family and some friends met me for, a week here and there. So to answer your
Okay.
question, a little bit of both.
I guess the obvious question is, as a solo traveler, is it harder?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's harder, and it's what I again, I like to keep things positive, but I think I know when I'm with family or friends, they are there to help me, and other people see that. Oh, she's with her partner. He will help her if she needs help. When I'm by myself, and this is what I love about my travels, is I get to see the world through a very, very unique lens that very few people are experiencing. But kind of like I was telling you with the Southeast Asia, to see people kind of come out of the woodwork, very unexpected people on the surface, to step up and reach out a lending hand. And I'm relying on strangers. They see me, and they naturally assume I need help. And most of the time I do when I'm
Mm-hmm.
by myself. And to experience that by myself is really, really rewarding and very special. It's hard to put into words how meaningful that is,
Yeah.
because you can travel as a solo traveler, and it's a similar experience to your friend that might travel as a solo traveler. But the way that people are reaching out, and the way I experience it, just feels really special and unique.
Kind of gives you a bit of faith, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it does. And it's been my favorite part of it. When I say I needed a refresh on humanity, I got that. I saw
That's
the
so good.
people around the world, and it wasn't a specific country or a specific part of the world. I went literally all the way around the world, and I had people from all over the world just reaching out and helping in different ways. So it was really cool to see that.
Yeah, that's just a kind of reaffirming that there are good people, because you do hear so much
It's so much
negativity and bad
negative.
stuff, especially right at the minute. Like there's so much going
It's
on.
it is, and it's heavy. And I pull up the news every day, and I see all
Yeah,
this negative things, and then it's like, remember, this person in this country, and the things they said, the things they did for you. And it's that, that one person can change your life, and remind you that there is good in all people.
yeah, that's great. And also within travel, you must do lots of activities.
Uh-huh.
So I'm talking about, maybe you want to go, obviously cafes and restaurants are a thing, coffee shops, but also maybe like walking up a hill or doing a little walk. Like, are these
Hmm.
things nowadays okay for you, or is there still some challenges with those?
It depends on the activity. I'll never climb Mount Everest, but
No. Same
I
here.
would love to. Fair enough, fair enough. I try very much to do as much as I can. And there are always people, whether it's family or a complete stranger, inevitably someone will come and say, you want to go over there? Well, there's a lot of steps. Get on my back. I will piggyback you. Or how can I help you? Or, it might be an employee. Hey, if you get in my truck, we can drive around the back way to, Angkor Wat. And, we don't have to go up this big hill. So get in my truck. We're going to drive around the back way, or I'm going to drive you up this hill, or just little things like that, I don't stop myself from seeing things. And the majority of the people in the world want me to see their country, their culture, their tourist sites, their history. And so they're really proud when they can help me to see those parts of their country.
That's all awesome people again, isn't it? That's great.
Exactly. Yep.
And also a question not got here actually, accommodation. Where do you normally stay? Is it hotels? Is it hostels? Is it Airbnbs? Like what's the easiest for you?
All of the above. Depends on the country, depends on the place, depends on safety. Hotels tend to have some level of standard. Yeah. So I like hotels. I do think some hotels can take away from the experience. I really love guest houses where it's, 10 rooms and you get to know the owner and they get to know me. But again, there's some level of, is this accessible? I've done hostels as well. It depends on the country, to be honest. It depends on the country. From my standpoint, there's always a lot of looking at pictures, sometimes sending them a message. Is this accessible? Do you have an elevator? Are there ramps? That kind of thing. So it just really depends on the country.
Yeah, I think I was going with the hotel aspect there. They must have in each country just a standard.
Exactly.
Whether it's good or not, I'm not sure, but they must just all keep to some sort of level of what they have to offer.
The definition of accessible varies by country. So
yeah. Okay. I've got a few more questions here. This is quite a big question. What changes would you make to make it easier and more accessible? I think we touched on airlines.
The airlines for sure. Outside of that, it's so hard. It's so hard because I look at the majority of the world, and I will say the majority because I think it is the majority of the world. When you look in a geographical space, the majority of the world has so much history. And if you're going to try to put ramps or accessible bathrooms into, I'll reference Angkor Wat again, you're going to have a really hard time and you're destroying a piece of the history. So how do you make that accessible? I don't have the answer. And I would love to say, here's the solution to it all, but it takes some financial means. It takes a lot of thought. It takes cultural changes. So I think that the world can get there. It just will take a lot of time. Yeah,
I think you're right there about the history thing. That's what I had in my mind because I'm like, being from UK, quite a lot of historical stuff. Yeah. I'm like, how can you change it or make it more accessible? Because you are going to have to interfere with old stuff.
Exactly. And selfishly, I want to see all of those things, but I also know that I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I'm doing. And if I can't get as close to some landmark because it's not accessible, I'm still grateful that I got to the point that I did. And so I don't want to destroy the world's history so that I can be selfish and, get inside of a building. And there's a level of, acceptance, I think, that comes with that. And that's okay. We can't all see everything from different lenses. And so I try to dwell on the positive.
Yeah, just thinking from my home city in Norwich, there's a huge cathedral and a castle, and they've got the really old pub from the, 1400s or something, like really old. But it's just cobbled streets everywhere. I'm like, how would you move freely in cobbled streets? There are pavements on the side, so I guess it is accessible now. But if I was to take you up the most historic street, even the pavement on the side is small. I think your wheelchair would fit, but I'm not sure. I'm like, how would I show you the street? Yeah.
But then you think about destroying that cobbled street. You do that to the whole street. It's no longer the same. It doesn't have the same feel. It doesn't have the same sounds. It's and so there's so much in that, so much history in that. So I don't have the answer to that. I get asked that question a lot. It's a really difficult one.
I guess the advantage for you is the newer countries who are expanding and creating things. I guess they've got a free shot. They can go and create all this accessibility stuff.
Absolutely. And when you think of the UK, so the town that you're referencing might not be very accessible for me, but I can go to London, and London will be much more accessible. So, you win some, you lose some. And I, again, don't necessarily love that mentality, but that is life. And there's a certain acceptance that comes with, this is the cards I have. I'm going to make the best of it.
Yeah, I love that attitude. Okay, that's great. And talking about places, let's go to some countries that you travel to.
Yeah.
We've got 3 on the list here. Let's start with Cuba, because that is actually a country I want to travel to next. I think we were talking before we recorded that I might travel some in the new year, and that's one of the countries.
Yeah.
So first off, Cuba, when did you visit and how long for?
I was in Cuba for about a week, maybe a little less. It was, I want to say 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
It was, so I have a US passport, and it was during the time where we weren't able to go, and then it opened up, and I called my sister and I said, all right, we can go. I don't know how long this is going to last. Let's go, because they might shut, they might shut down the visitation for US citizens again. And so a couple weeks later, we were on a flight. It was when, if any of the listeners have read about Cuba, it's like, they say it's like going back to the 60s.
Yeah.
And it is like going back to the 60s.
Wow.
And it is so fun because there's no internet. There's an internet park. So once a day you walk over to this little park. All the people are there on their phones, checking in with their family. And then you walk away and there's no internet. And for me, there's just something about being away from all of that technology and just taking it in and absorbing what's around you. So that's really special. And the people are just fantastic. It was me and my sister when we went, and we just walked around the streets the first evening we got there. The next day, they all remembered us. Oh, wow. Of course, two blonde girls going through the streets in Cuba might have something to do with it, but they knew our names. They knew where we were from. And they were so friendly and so welcoming. We felt incredibly safe. And it was just, the food was great. The culture was great. And the cars are from the 60s. Like it was so cool. It was really cool. So I highly recommend it. I'm excited for you to get there.
And you went to Havana for a week.
Havana. Yeah. We went to Havana. We did take a day trip out to one of the beaches. It was beautiful. I know there's a ton of beaches in Cuba, but I loved Havana, the city, more than the beach. Just personal preference, and it could have just been the day that we were there, but Havana was so much fun.
And what is the situation now for US citizens to Cuba?
I don't believe that US citizens are able to go to Cuba.
Right.
I don't quote me on that because I haven't followed it too much, but I don't think that they're able to get in on a US passport.
Can Cubans go into US?
No, I don't think
so. Right, so it's both ways. Wow.
Correct. I don't think so. Now, one thing that a US citizen could do, I believe this is a possibility, is get to Canada and fly from Canada directly to Cuba.
Yes. So my next point was going to be, even for us on UK passports, if you go via US, there's a different visa thing to fill out, and it's more expensive.
Exactly.
So you just need to avoid US going into Cuba. But if that works for US citizens, where you can go to Canada or go to Mexico and across, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it's an ever-changing environment. So if anyone's interested, do your research. Don't just get on a plane.
And what was your experience with just the day-to-day, like cash only, I'd imagine? And also, how did you change your money?
Cash only. Your ATM, my ATM card at least, did not work there. So the majority of ATM cards will not work. We went with US dollars. They will take euros also. Okay. But when I can't remember where we did. It was either at the airport or there was a shop in the village. There's probably multiple of them. But you take your US dollars in or your euros, and you just exchange them right there. And that's great. You want to make sure you bring plenty, because if you run out, you are pretty stuck. No credit cards, no debit cards, no ATMs. So we went with a little surplus just in case we had a little too much fun or needed some extra spending money.
Did you go like sample the nightlife in Havana? Like, in terms of, I've got a feeling like you go to some places, have a little dance and stuff like that. Yeah,
we did. And we didn't, there was, I don't know if they have this or not, but we didn't do like underground bars or like crowded bars. We hung out in the street, and there was dancing in the street. There was drinking in the street. It was just like a fun party in the street. And it wasn't like a crowded, a bunch of drunk people in the street. It was just like a fun outing in the street, and it went late into the night. And I don't normally do that stuff when I'm traveling, for safety reasons mostly, but
Yeah.
it felt very safe. There were two of us, and we just had a fantastic time. It was awesome.
Oh, just the music and like a
Exactly.
community vibe and stuff like that,
Yeah,
maybe.
you can just feel the energy of everyone
Yeah.
just having a great time.
Oh, that's so cool. And
Yeah.
the cheapness of it all, was it quite cheap?
It was, yeah, it was very cheap. It was very
Yeah,
cheap. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
expect that. I think
Yeah.
maybe now it might be slightly more expensive because they're opening up a
Sure.
bit more. But yeah,
Sure.
I
Sure.
think I was looking at Airbnbs, and like in Havana, you can get
Yeah.
a pretty decent apartment for very cheap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had an Airbnb, and the Airbnb owner was fantastic. I think his first name was Pedro, and he called every morning, and on a landline, because there's no cell
Of
phones or anything.
course.
So he
Yeah.
calls on the landline. We wake up because we're asleep. It rings, and he's like, "Renee, I just want to make sure everything's okay." And you can just feel his like passion for hosting people, and it was really, really cool.
I think what's interesting, Airbnb is fine, but Booking.com, I don't think, or Hostelworld, you can't use.
Hmm.
My friend was saying that you just speak to your like Pedro, and he probably
Uh-huh.
rings someone up in somewhere like another town, probably a family member, and say, "Hey, you can
Yep.
stay there." I think that's how it
Yeah.
works. You've got to get
Yeah.
speaking to some people.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very much a handshake type of culture.
And what's the Spanish like there? Is it easy to understand?
I did not know much Spanish when I went there, but the little that I did, yeah, I think it was. The
Mm.
accent was pretty neutral. It was not
Yeah.
difficult. It was not difficult. Yeah.
Oh, what a place. Yeah. So I'm excited to go.
Yes.
You whet the appetite there.
Yes. You will have a fantastic time, no doubt.
Awesome. Okay. The next place is a very unusual place for the podcast.
Uh-huh.
Only a few people have mentioned it because it's a place that I think hardcore travelers would try to get to because it's quite unknown. Is Kiribati.
Uh-huh.
So can you tell the listeners where the hell is that? And it's pretty small, right?
It's very small. So Kiribati, you will hear both.
Yeah.
It is in the South Pacific. So a lot of people know where Fiji is at. I flew there from Fiji. It was an 1.5 hour flight from Fiji. So it's its own little island country, and it is one of my favorite places in the world. I don't even, I want to say it was life-changing, but I don't know exactly what it was that was life-changing for me. But it is predicted to be underwater in 30 to 50 years, if not sooner, maybe 20, just with the rising sea waters. And it's very evident when you're there. The people there are very, very aware that they will likely be displaced within their lifetimes. And Fiji has said, "Come to our island, we will take you." New Zealand and Australia have said, "Come, you're welcome to be in our homes." But they don't want to. So
Yeah, of course.
it's their home. Fiji is an island and has similar culture, but it's very different. So they joke about, the next tsunami that comes through and we're all gone. And they just have this very lighthearted attitude about the potential of a cyclone or a tsunami coming through. And they just kind of accept that this is their home, and they are not leaving. They are so passionate about their home. But the island is itself, I landed on one side and I drove down a one-way street, and you could look out to the right, look out to the left, and see water on both sides. It's just a two-way street. There's homes on one side, you kind of see between the homes, and the other side is just water. So it's this narrow strip. It's just a long island. And the people that I didn't have a lot of plans when I got there. They have other islands that you can take a boat to. They're all sand covered, no asphalt or cement. So I opted to stay on the main island because wheelchairs and sand. If you've ever ridden a bicycle in the sand, you can understand. So I opted to stay on the main island. Didn't really have a lot of plans, and the hotel that I was staying at was more like a guest house. Some of the workers there, I had gotten in around 6 or 7 p.m. They said, "Hey, when we get done working, we're going over to do karaoke at this place right next door. You should come along." And again, this is not something I normally do. So I'm like, I don't know, it's dark. I don't really know the area. I don't want to be drinking in this place, but they convinced me, and we just had a fantastic time and hung out all the next day. And, they had me swimming in the ocean, and it was just such a welcoming culture, and beautiful, beautiful people, beautiful water, and beautiful islands on top of it. But the people are always what get me the most.
Yeah, how unusual is that though, that you go to a place where they've kind of accepted
Yeah,
It's going to happen,
yeah.
and you can't do nothing about it in
They
terms of
can't
the nature.
they can't. One of the things that's really interesting, they have a lot of plastic on their islands, from drinking
Ah,
water and a
right,
lot of
okay,
plastic.
yeah,
So they take all of their trash, mostly plastic, and the waters are rising. So this island, if you think of a long strip of land, it's becoming very narrow, and they're not going to have a lot of space for homes. And so what they're doing is they take all the plastic, they pile it up on one side of the island, compact it, go out further into the ocean, pull out a bunch of sand, put sand on top of the plastic, and then they build their homes on top of it.
right, okay,
And so it's this creative, I don't know that it's the best way, but it's working for them. And it's just, they're saying, we're not leaving. If we have to build our homes on top of plastic trash, that's what we'll
mm.
do. And but they accept their fate, and they're amazing people.
Cool. And from a morbid traveler point of view,
Uh-huh.
well, you better get there quick if you want to see it.
From a morbid traveler standpoint, I'm ashamed to say that is why I went.
Yeah, yeah, because
Yeah.
I don't think there's a shame in that, because you're going to invest in local
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
and probably make it more aware. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what we can do, but yeah, I don't think there's a shame in that.
No, I think it does feed their infrastructure, and it gives them some financial means to help with their economy. And when I am there, there's this very huge awareness of, use the reusable water bottle you have if you
Mm,
can. You don't need to have your air conditioning on in the room. Everyone else is sleeping with their window open. These people
yeah,
certainly do not have air conditioning in their homes, live like the locals. And so, I try to do that as much as I can, especially in places like that where it's just a matter of time for them.
and logistically, I guess people need to get to Fiji or Hawaii.
Fiji, I think Fiji is the only
Okay,
airline that you have to go to Fiji to get there.
got it. So people need to
Yep.
get to Fiji.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as it's such a small country, I guess there's a limited things you can do. But I guess you just want to be with the people, right, and
There
hang around
are. I
those.
know a lot of other travelers that have been there, and some that I had met kind of, along the way, had gone out to some of the other islands. They're very
Mm,
small, and there's people that live there, and you can stay with them in their home, and they will, go out. You'll go out coconut picking, you'll go out
yeah,
fishing, you go out and do all of those things, ride bicycle, through the compacted sand. I didn't do that because there is no asphalt or no hard surface, and I just
mm,
didn't want to get myself in a situation where I'm just stuck and isolated. So
yeah.
if you do get to Kiribati, I do recommend get on a boat and go check out one of those other islands if you're able to physically.
Do you know the country of your guest house that you stayed at? Country, sorry, the
The
name of the
the
guest
name,
house.
yes,
Yeah,
it was called George's Hotel.
got it. So that's a
Yeah,
cool place maybe people to stay.
yeah. I think there's only two actual hotels on the main island,
Okay,
so
right.
George's Hotel and then another one.
Okay, that's fair enough. And just other logistical stuff for budget. Is it expensive because of the situation, or is it actually quite reasonable?
I would say it's moderate.
Okay,
I've certainly been to places that are much more inexpensive. Certainly been to places much more expensive. I would say it was moderate.
and the currency they use?
They use, ooh, you're quizzing me here. I want to say the Australian dollar. They
Okay,
might have their own local currency.
cool.
Mm,
That's like
They,
a
I think they're using the Australian dollar.
yeah. If they've got local
Yeah.
currency, that's something just to almost
Yeah.
keep like a little bit of it, because that's
Yeah.
gonna, in
Yeah.
theory, not be needed. And
Gosh, you have me really questioning. I'll have to Google it when we hang up. I'm not
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Okay, that's great. Kiribati. Okay. The reason I've had it once in the podcast is because another podcaster said that someone listened to his podcast from there and he couldn't believe it, because I
Uh-huh.
guess there's not many people there, and the
Yeah,
fact that
it's
someone
true. Yeah.
there has listened to a podcast, that's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Okay, and the third country you've listed is Cambodia. We touched on Angkor Wat. This is a
Yes.
classic Southeast Asia country that people go to. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And I think the thing that I love about Cambodia is, it's hard. I shouldn't say I love, but the thing that Cambodia was this was before before the pandemic. So this was years ago. It was really a turning point in my travel, where I was traveling out, lots of places in Europe, the Caribbean, lots of just like vacation-y type places. And,
Yeah.
I'm having wine at dinner, I'm having a great time. But Cambodia really was one of the first places where my eyes were really opened to the harshness that exists in this world. And there was this huge educational component that I had not ever experienced before. And it really overtook me because the killing fields, the genocide that they had been through not that long ago.
Yeah.
And the way that these people overcame all of that and welcomed me into their country, they weren't judgmental, they were positive, they were happy. And on top of that, it's a beautiful country. It's just, I mean, aside from the people, just the aesthetics of it are beautiful. And it was a turning point for me to say, I want to get out and see some more meaningful parts of the world. Not that Europe and the Caribbean and other places of those world aren't meaningful. This, for me personally, Cambodia really touched me in a way that I said, I need to start to understand more of the world and how it all kind of comes together.
Yeah, I think I quoted them before in the podcast that's the one country in Southeast Asia. So the classic trip, you go for 3-6 months, whatever.
Yep.
Hedonistic, you're probably doing a lot of partying, but you probably get to Cambodia, not knowing much about it. Yeah. And when you go and see, is it Prison 21 or the Killing Fields, you're kind of like, oh God, this happened like 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it throws a few travelers like, oh God, yeah, that you probably grew up a little bit there because you realize that some of the horrors are just awful.
Yeah, and the things that humans can do to humans.
Yes.
And to your point, I went in pretty blind to it all, thinking, this is going to be a cheap country. I've heard it's wonderful. I'm going to have a great time. And I'm just hit with this brick wall of, here's the reality of Cambodia. And I obviously all of that is very horrible, but it was a good thing for me because it was a point where I said, I need to start experiencing my travel differently.
This is a Patreon shout out to Laura from the Swamp Soup Stickers, who has contributed £5 to the podcast on my Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it, and it helps the podcast to keep going in the future. If you're interested, head to the show notes where you'll find a link to my Patreon. The website address is patreon.com/Winging It Travel Podcast. For £5 English, you will receive some trendy stickers from myself in the post, a shout out on each episode, and also my digital travel planner by email. Thank you for your support. Yeah, I think we went to the King of Fields. That was tough. What we're a little bit disappointed with is afterwards our tuk-tuk driver asked a really strange timing if we want to go and shoot a cow. Because you can go shoot like big bazookas and like grenades and stuff. You can pay not very much money to go and do that in Cambodia if you want to do that. But the timing after going to King Fields Museum and then been offered, nah, mate, it's just a rock. We don't want to shoot a cow. We just want to go back and have a tea.
Yeah, exactly. And just like let this settle and process it a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
So that was very interesting. Cambodia is just a great country to go and see. Angkor Wat, I went twice. 6-7 years apart, changed a lot. Now it's much more, I would say, accessible.
For sure.
I think there's like they built a new like center where you can get your tickets and stuff. It just seems to be a bit more modern now.
Yeah, I was with my mom and my boyfriend when we went. We had a tuk-tuk driver who he picked us up at the airport, which was really cool. I've never been picked up at an airport in a tuk-tuk.
Oh yeah, I got picked up at the airport with a tuk-tuk.
Yeah, it was cool. So cool. But we ended up hanging out with him the whole week, and he drove us around, and he, like I was telling you earlier, he was able to bring us to some of those like, oh, come around this way and we'll get you as close as possible. So it was really nice to have him there, and he kind of snuck us through some secret pathways.
Oh, nice. How was that traveling in a tuk-tuk?
It's interesting. It's, you get in, it's like put the wheelchair kind of in front of me, half on my lap. It folds up, it collapses, but it's like hang on to this for dear life. So you've got one arm on the chair, one on the edge of the tuk-tuk because you don't want to fall off yourself, and you make it work.
Yeah, I would recommend that. The only problem we had with the tuk-tuk driver is he parked himself in amongst 1,000 other tuk-tuks, and we couldn't remember what the tuk-tuk looked like. So trying to find it was like a needle in a haystack. Quite interesting.
Of course.
But yeah, that's great. Okay, Cambodia is awesome. Okay, got a few more questions before we move on to your own blogs, websites, and stuff like that. Is there any countries that you traveled to that just wasn't an enjoyable experience as a whole? Maybe it's a mix of accessibility, but also it just wasn't what you thought, maybe, or didn't enjoy it at all.
This question is common, and it's
a hard question
because I think, to your point, every country depends on the weather, the people you're with, how well did you sleep that night, did you get sick, all of those things. If I had to choose for lack of a better term, least favorite country, I would say Morocco. That being said, I do not think it was Morocco the country. I think I was with people that I didn't necessarily enjoy. Didn't sleep well. I think it was just a set of circumstances.
Okay.
And to say it was even my least favorite, I don't want to put it at the bottom of the list, but it's not one that I'm dying to go back to.
Okay. I think the reason I chuck those questions in, because my podcast is very positive about travel, but I do think you have to chuck in a few questions that aren't positive all the time, because there's some tough parts of travel, right?
Well, and I think all travelers have a place that they say, glad I was there, don't have a desire to go back.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And again, it's not anything with the people or the place. It's just, there's other places I need to go see. I want to see all the countries in the world. So it's, I've got a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah. And an extra bonus place, because it's not a country technically, it's a continent, Antarctic. So what was that experience like?
That was one of my most favorite experiences.
Okay.
It was a dream trip. Antarctica. I went with my family and my partner on this one. This was just last year, not even a year ago. So we flew down to the southern tip of Argentina, which I was at the town down there. We got on a boat, and we have to drive, or not we, but we're on a boat with 150 other people, and we're sailing over the Drake Passage, which is the roughest body of open water in the world. And it is rough. You're bouncing back and forth. Like, I stayed in bed for the first 24 hours. I got up to get some food and then got back in bed, taking medicine and everything. And then 2.5 days later, you wake up at 5 a.m., the boat's not moving. And it's very obvious that the boat's not moving because you're not rolling around on your bed. And it's like, we're here. So I remember it was 5 a.m. The sun was up the whole time because, we're at the bottom of the planet. But our cabin, we got the very low grade cabin. We're in the basement of the boat. We don't have windows. So we know it's 5 a.m. and we get up, we walk out to the deck, and it's like we're in a different planet. We had been shook around. I've obviously not been to outer space, but you picture, you see the astronauts bouncing around. That's what it felt like. And then all of a sudden it's calm and there's just white everywhere, and just beautiful. So it was fantastic experience. We had an option to do kayaking, which is something I can do. So I was like, yes, I want to kayak. We kayaked for 2 days for a few hours. Got to see whales and penguins and seals and tons of icebergs. I mean, super, super cool. And then one night we had an optional excursion to sleep under the stars. They call it under the stars, although it never really got dark. And so we did that. It was a bittersweet experience. The weather was incredibly windy, and they had kind of told us after we got back, if they would have known, they wouldn't have brought us out into that level of elements.
Right.
But we get into these, they call it a bivy bag, and it's essentially a thermal waterproof sleeping bag. Everybody gets their own, and you're just laying on the ground. And we get in, and I think we're going to listen to the sounds of the whales. We're going to hear the penguins mating and all of these cool things. And about an hour after we all lay down, we're all kind of chatting quietly, it starts to snow, and about 40-mile-an-hour wind comes through, and it does not stop. So it was pretty brutal. And there were five, me plus 4 in my party. We all cried at some point, thinking like, oh my God, are we going to die here? Will they even retrieve our bodies? We had these horrible images, but hindsight is obviously 2020, and I'm so glad I did it. Super cool experience. Difficult from an accessibility standpoint. Lots of piggyback rides. Wheelchairs in snow don't do well, kind of like the sand. So lots of piggyback rides, but the kayaking was definitely something I could do. Get right in the kayak from the boat that we were on, so I got to see things that way. I did that. A lot of other people did some hiking or wandering around on the snow, but it's that whole altering how you see things, and that's okay. So Antarctica, definitely once in a lifetime trip. If anyone can get there, highly recommend it. Little trick for folks if you are wanting to get there, because it is costly. If you if you have time and you can get to Ushuaia, often the cruise companies will get last minute cancellations for couples or families that are sick or having a family emergency, or whatever reason they can't come, and they will sell that room at half price last minute.
Ooh, okay.
Because it's empty, so they may as well get some money for it, and they can't get full price last minute. So if you have the time and you're really wanting to get there, that is an option to think about.
So get to Ushuaia down in Argentina,
Ushuaia,
chill out there for a bit, and just
and Ushuaia is a beautiful town.
Looks great.
Yeah, so it's not, you're not sitting out in the middle of nowhere. There's things to do, but get there, check out the there's a couple different tour companies, and see if you can get on a last minute cancellation, and often it works. I've heard some travelers do it for pretty inexpensively. So
wow, that's a great tip. Okay, random question about snow. If it's hard snow, would the wheelchair be okay?
Yes. Yeah. If it's hard snow, yes. Kind of compacted down. Same with
compacted.
Sand. Yeah, same with the sand. Yeah.
And I guess Antarctica maybe has quite soft snow because it snows all the time, right?
It depends on the weather. Yeah. It depends on the weather and obviously the location. The hard part with Antarctica is it can be hard in one area, and then you take a step and you fall. Not that you fall. It's not like a big hole, but your foot goes in or whatever. And so you just have to be careful.
Okay, got it. Okay, my last question for travels is, I haven't put this on here, is because you're part of a lot of the traveling communities. Have you been to anywhere that's unusual in terms of, like you're part of that, maybe some travel communities where they go to like all these obscure islands and out there places? Have you done any of those obscure places?
I guess I would ask, what is obscure? Because in my mind, nothing is obscure.
No, okay, fair enough.
Kiribati, for example, I think a lot of people would say is obscure. Antarctica, kind of. Nothing is coming to mind, although I'm sure I've got something. It's not coming to mind.
Sure there's like islands that are hard to get to, and like Tristan da Cunha or Bouvet Island, or like Svalbard at the top, like any of those sort of places. I
haven't been to any of those. I mean, of course, I would love to. I would love to, but nothing is coming to mind. So I'll say no to that question.
That's cool. That's good. That's my last question. And I'm going to move on to just a bit about your blog, speaking events, social media, website, and stuff like that. My first question, you do have a Guinness World Record. So what is that?
My Guinness World Record is most countries traveled to in 1 year using a wheelchair.
Yeah.
That's the key part there. So I had 66 countries when I traveled on my year around the world, or when I quit my job and I was traveling, I hit 66 countries. So I want to caveat that with a few things. Guinness World Record counts as long as you stepped into that country and you have a stamp in your passport and a boarding pass. That can be a train ticket, an airline ticket, that type of thing. Okay. So I personally don't count on my own roster of countries if I'm just going to an airport and laying over. That does count for Guinness. So there were a few countries that were there. I had already been to all of those countries. So I laid over in India once, and I had been to India on a separate trip. I think I laid over in Paris and didn't leave the airport, but I've been to Paris a couple times. So I didn't cheat, but I do want to preface that this wasn't I'm getting to each country, spending 12 hours there and leaving. And from my standpoint, I want to get to a country. I want to leave the airport. I want to try the food. I want to interact with a local. I want to stay the night. I want to have an experience there. And I think that's important, because I think sometimes people are trying to check these countries off and they're not having the experience. And for all of those people, kudos to you. However you travel, no judgment whatsoever. This is my own personal preference, but I want to have that experience in that culture.
Yeah, that's a very big question that I asked Rick Kazarian that question. I think we had a 20-minute chat about what is a country. It's it's actually a tough question to answer.
It is. And when you I think of places like Kiribati, population that's very small, versus India. And I could spend 3 years in India and probably not even see it all. 3 years in Kiribati and I'm bored out of my mind, So I think everyone has their own definition of it, but however you're doing it, you're experiencing that, and that's really all that matters.
And when you said that you're going to every country in the world, is that the UN specified?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Again, some people will say every country, they might include 10 extra ones because some not recognized. And
I'm doing the UN countries.
Got it. Okay. Speaking of events, are you doing the Extraordinary Travel Festival next year?
I am.
Are
I
you
am.
speaking at it?
I am. Yes.
Ah,
I am. I am so excited. It's my first year going to the event,
yeah,
actually.
it'd be mine. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to meet you and so many other people. I cannot wait. It's so interesting because there's like this community of all of these extreme travelers, and I feel like I know them all personally and so well, and I've not met hardly any of them
Oh,
in
wow.
person.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah.
going to be so cool. I am speaking at it. Really excited for that. Really, it's in Bangkok. Really excited to go to Bangkok. I've been there before, but it's been a number of years, and that's one of my favorite parts of the world. So who
Yeah.
knows where
Same.
I'm going to get over there and obviously do some traveling from there too. So super, super excited about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I said to Rick on our conversation, which was before the announcement of where it was,
Uh-huh.
I said to him, "Oh yeah, well, I'll hope to do some trips afterwards. Just make it a trip."
Yeah.
Then he
Yeah.
announced Bangkok, and I was like, "Ah, well, I want to go to Bhutan because I've not been." So he gave me a
Uh,
contact, and then like
uh,
2 weeks later, he's like, "Oh, we're adding Bhutan as a trip to the
uh-huh.
festival." So I'm like, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
I might as well do that." But
Yeah, it's
yeah,
perfect.
so
Yeah.
if people are listening and are curious to understand, it's Extraordinary Travel Festival. You put that in Google, and you'll see some stuff about that. But it's a collection of travelers come together, have a good time, some speaking events like Renee's doing, and then
Yeah.
get to meet some people and go to do some excursions if you want to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a beautiful part of the world too.
Yeah, what a place. Okay, and you have a website as well.
Yes, reneebruns.net. So first last name, reneebruns.net. And there is a link on there for my blog. My travel blog is wheelstravelstheworld.com.
And how often do you blog?
I go in streaks, depending on what I'm doing. When I am out on the road actively doing something, I try to get it out within a day or two, because if I don't get it on paper, my memory starts to fail me, and
Tell me about it.
selfishly, I want to have it all down, to remember it all, but I want to share it with the world. So when I'm out on the road, I try to get it out pretty quickly.
Oh, you should do a podcast. That's an easy one. Just get
Yes,
like a little
that's
recording
true.
device each day. Just
Yeah,
5 minutes what you've done.
I do. I actually turn all of my blogs into audio, and I just
Oh,
read them.
great.
So I know a lot of people prefer to consume their blogs, or their media through audio. So I do have that audio version.
That's brilliant. Okay, and your social medias?
My Facebook is Renee Bruns. Instagram is Wheels Travels. Instagram is where all the good pictures and all the good stuff is.
Yeah, I'll put some links into the show notes for that.
Perfect.
And just a final few words of wisdom before we go to the quickfire travel questions about traveling as a wheelchair user. Any just final comments?
Yeah, I think it's, gosh, don't be afraid. I would say this is true for all travelers, but especially for wheelchair users. Build in a day at a really comfortable hotel that is very accessible, and do not feel bad about taking a day, even if you're just staying in the hotel, because it's 100% accessible and you can use the restroom and the restaurant and get into your bed. Do not feel bad about taking a day to just rest and say, I need this, because it is exhausting to travel. It is extra exhausting to travel when you don't know what the toilets are going to look like, or how you're going to be treated, or what the physical component of getting yourself around a city or a country. So give yourself permission to rest.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. So we're going to go to some quick fire travel questions. These are just like normally favorite things on the road. It could vary from food to experience, etc. And this will end the episode. So my first question: it's travel question time. You kind of spoken about these, but I wonder if it's the same. Favorites. I know people don't like favorites, especially people who travel a lot, but 3 favorite countries you travel to?
Indonesia, Laos, and I'll say Kiribati.
Ah, okay. And 3 countries you've not traveled to that's on your hit list?
Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia, Turkmenistan, and Madagascar.
Oh yeah, God,
Yeah,
they're 3.
I'm really excited about that. Madagascar.
Very interesting countries.
Yeah.
Okay, that reminds me. I talked to Rick about Madagascar, about getting to a place to go and see the trees, the famous trees. Yeah, he said there's 3 ways to do it, and they're all quite tough in terms of just being like long drives or very few flights. So I'd be keen I'll be keeping an eye on how you get on there. I'll be keen to see
Yeah.
how it happens.
Yeah. I haven't, in full transparency, I have done no travel planning on that. I just know I want to go there. It looks beautiful. So
Yeah,
got
so
some work to
unique.
do. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. If you could live anywhere in the world for 1 year that you've not lived in before, where are you going to live?
So I'm doing Argentina right now. That was high on my list. If I take that off of the list, oh gosh, I would say probably somewhere in Southeast Asia, maybe Laos,
Okay.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. 3 favorite cuisines on your travels.
Italy, Italian food. I
Hmm.
mean, who doesn't love Italian food?
I've not found anyone
Um,
yet. No.
yeah, exactly. Um, I love some of the Asian foods, the rice entrees. And what else? Gosh, I'm not a foodie, so this is difficult.
Okay.
Some of the Middle Eastern food is really good.
Oh yeah.
No, India. I'm gonna go India. India.
Yep.
I take back my
Somewhere.
Middle Eastern. I'm gonna go with India.
That's fair enough. Okay. If you could sit somewhere in a city with a coffee and watch the world go by, where are you going to sit?
Probably somewhere in Europe. Portugal. Portugal. I'm gonna go Portugal along the coast.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. And what about a favorite beach that you've been to?
Favorite beach. I really love the beaches in the Turks and Caicos.
Oh yeah, they look amazing.
Yeah, they're
Huh.
mostly limestone and not traditional sand. It's mostly limestone, so they're very white and clear.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I think I'm gonna go Turks and Caicos.
Yeah, that's a good option. Okay. What about 3 US states that are your favorites? Not the one that you live
Favorites.
in.
Oh, yeah, of course. Oregon. I love Oregon.
Hmm.
Vermont is beautiful, especially in the fall. And Colorado. They've
Oh,
got the mountains.
everyone says Colorado.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I
it must
know.
be good. We
Yeah,
didn't go.
exactly.
We didn't go on the road trip, unfortunately. So
Yeah,
next time.
yeah.
Okay, a favorite trail or hike or walk.
Mm. Anywhere in the world.
Or it could be a country that's got great
Yeah,
trails. Yeah.
Costa Rica.
Ah,
And I
okay.
don't know that it's necessarily trails, but they have the rainforest is beautiful, and I've driven through it, kind of walked through it a little bit. I'm gonna go with Costa Rica.
Okay, that's interesting. What about top 3 favorite cities?
Budapest, Istanbul, and Buenos Aires.
Yeah, very great cities. That. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
unreal.
that's a tough question.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, some people don't like cities though. So like, oh, I don't really like many
Yeah,
cities. But
yeah.
okay, a couple of more. Let's do maybe a favorite activity you've done on your travels. It's quite an interesting one, I think.
Yeah, when I was in Bonaire, it's a little island near Venezuela. It's I think it's a territory of the Netherlands. So Bonaire is they have a lot of winds there. It's very windy, and I was
Yeah.
with my sister, and she wanted to do some windsurfing, and I thought, great, you can do some windsurfing. I'm going to sit at this little bar. I'm going to drink pina coladas while you windsurf, and having a great time. And she's out there for, I don't know, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And she hollers at me and she's like, I think you can do this. You can get on this board and, you can like sit on it or kneel on it and you can windsurf. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm kind of enjoying my pina colada here. Like, this is easy. And she's like, get out here. And so I got out there. The guy that was teaching her, she had never done it before. He was like, get out here, you can do it. And so I got out there and I did some windsurfing.
Wow.
And it was really, really cool. I mean, just the windsurfing experience, but the fact that I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. And, I was like, all right, fine, I guess I'm doing this. And it was really cool. Really,
God,
really
that's
cool.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
unreal. Okay, I did not expect that. And the last question is for any traveler out there, any words of advice, a couple of sentences as to why someone should get out there and see the world?
Educational opportunities, I think, is the big one. It's it changes your life every time you go somewhere new. You meet somebody who says something that is just by total happenstance and you latch onto those words. It gives you perspective. You've got to do it. It gives you perspective into the the pieces of this world that come together and how we really are all connected.
Awesome. I love finishing on those sort of quotes. So Renee, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been a very interesting chat. I've learned a lot of good stuff. And also I think a lot of listeners are going to learn a lot from that. And that's very educational. Like people are like, oh, okay. So Renee's given us some tips and what it's like to travel as a wheelchair user. And also the amount of countries you travel to is amazing. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And see you next year.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to my Winging It Travel podcast episode today. You can find me on Instagram at James Hammond Travel or Winging It Travel Podcast. You can search for both. I release weekly clips of this podcast episode, as well as photos from the last 8 to 10 years of my travels. You can also follow me on TikTok, Facebook and Pinterest by searching Winging It Travel Podcast. I do release daily content to do with travel and the podcast throughout the week. Also check out my website, jameshammond.org. There's content about myself, my travels, and there's also a newsletter sign up as well as a contact form. Finally, please rate and review the podcast on Podchaser. This is my platform of choice. Alternatively, you can rate this on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. This really helps the podcast gain a bit of traction for the future in terms of guests and content. And I'm glad to see that you guys are listening out there, reviewing it and enjoying the content so far. Stay safe, stay humble, keep listening, keep traveling, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers, James.